time at Florida State, we were very, very heavily involved in science diving and doing a lot of the very early cave exploration. We weren't really exploring as much as we were supporting different departments at Florida State University.
That's definitely a good place to get into cave diving, that's for sure.
It was, and cave diving, at the time when I went down there, I was really not interested in cave diving, but part of being the Associate Dive Safety Officer and Instructional Coordinator, I had to do that, which was probably one of the more challenging things that I had to do, but the cave training was probably some of the best training I'd ever had. Partly because you learn a lot more about buoyancy control than you do in standard scuba training programs, because you have to. And then it was sort of emotionally challenging because there were a lot of places that we went to that were very difficult to get into. They had major restrictions where you literally had to do almost like Lamaze caving, where you had to work your way in, wiggle your way in, exhale as much as you can, wiggle a little further, inhale as much as you can, exhale as much as you can, wiggle a little further until you finally were able to get into the open part of the cave system. And that was all done for research purposes that were supporting different departments, for example, like the hydrology department at Florida State or the archaeology department or any of the other departments that needed some sort of assistance.
What year was this?
I was there from 1988 to 1991. So I was there for 3 years altogether, and then I was recruited to go to Dan in North Carolina.
So at that point, BCs were really starting to come into a new dynamic. Side mount hadn't really come along yet at this point, so the equipment was still fairly bulky and not commercially efficient.
Yeah, it was very bulky and sometimes very, very rudimentary because prior to doing that, I'd actually never used wings before. Mm-hmm. And I can remember that the first set of wings that I had were homemade wings that were made by a guy named Steve Gerard, who worked for us at Florida State. And Steve was a very prominent cave diver. And so I can remember removing the cloth bag from around the wings and seeing a car inner tube as the inflatable part of the wings, which didn't give me a whole lot of confidence, believe me. And then they didn't have side mount, but we did occasionally carry an 80 with us because we were using double 104s, which are extremely heavy and extremely bulky. And then we'd occasionally carry an 80 under an arm. And then we'd occasionally have drop tanks at various places, depending upon the length of dive we were doing. And then we were doing a lot of other things at the time. We were doing a lot of stuff with nitrox in a couple of different ways. One way, from a scientific standpoint, was to increase our bottom time, because a lot of the work that we were doing in the Gulf of Mexico was in relatively shallow water. And because of that, we wanted as much bottom time as we could, so we were using various nitrox mixes. I was actually using nitrox for another reason, because part of what we had to do was to provide training to science divers. So somebody who was a certified diver didn't necessarily get automatic entrance into our science program. So we had to make sure that they were competent enough to really be able to do the kind of work that they were doing underwater. So I would have my staff go out into the Gulf and do training dives and observation dives with some of these people to make sure that they were qualified to be able to do the science work. Well, they were doing a lot of ascents and descents with these people in water where the depth was generally no deeper than about 60 feet. So what I was using nitrox for at the time, which I'm certainly recommending now to people to be conservative, is to use it with air dive tables. We weren't using computers necessarily back in those days very often, but using a nitrox mix with the limits that were required for using air tables, which actually gave them a safety factor. So nitrox was a big thing that we were doing. Plus also, we had projects that were a little bit deeper down in the southern part of Florida. And one was at a place called Warm Mineral Springs in Venice. And Warm Mineral Springs was a very unique place because it was a place where ancient seawater was being pumped up near its crust. So it was temperatures where the temperature never went below 84 degrees. And the water was heavily mineralized. So during the night, the water was very clear, but as soon as it interacted with sunlight the next morning, at least the first 15 to 20 feet turned opaque. And then at 50 feet was a ledge that we think 10,000 years ago was a human habitation site. We actually found human remains at 50 feet on this ledge because we think the water level was 50 feet shallower 10,000 years ago. And then we found a burial site, we found a kill site, we found a saber-toothed cat skeleton, we found a giant Florida bear skeleton on this ledge. And then at the bottom was a cone of sediment that had been accumulating for at least as long as that spring had been open, which we think was at least 10,000 years. So we were supporting an archaeologist who was looking at that cone of sediment. And it was 124 feet to the tip of the cone of sediment and about 170 feet to the base of that cone of sediment. So because of the work that he was doing, the archaeologist, we were supporting him from the surface because we were using surface applied gas. We were using trimix. And so we were doing stuff with trimix earlier than most other places were using mixed gas.
Wow. And what year
that was 1988 and 89.
Wow, trimix in the 80s.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That was revolutionary.
It was very early, and it was. I mean, we were learning a lot, and we were getting as much advice as we could from the authorities that were available, like Bill Hamilton, for example, and some information from the U.S. Navy and from anybody else who had experience in using mixed gases.
That's incredible. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the things we do now are the things that you've learned and added to that point. And I didn't realize it had gone quite that far back. And I feel like still, even with trimix, we're still in a great learning phase of understanding the true effects and overall dynamic of what that is. And even with it as widespread as it is, I still feel like there's so much more research that needs to be done and really needs to understand of how the metabolic and the physiology work with the human body.
Yeah, in fact, actually, I mentioned that I had worked at Divers Alert Network, and that's actually where trimix was created. Because in 1981, Dan started in 1980, and in 1981, the person who was the president of Dan, Dr. Peter Bennett, was involved in a deep diving research project called the Atlantis Project. And the Atlantis Project involved divers living and working at a depth of down to 2,250 feet. So they were in the chamber complex at Duke University Medical Center, which is a massive complex at 8 chambers, one of which could go down to that depth. And during their dives to reach 2,250 feet, they were getting to extreme depths, like over 1,000. And at that point, divers were getting tremors, which is high pressure nervous syndrome. Mm-hmm. And they couldn't figure out exactly why that was happening, nor could they figure out exactly what to do about it. But they knew it wasn't going to be compatible with doing a safe dive. So during that Atlantis project, Dr. Bennett said, well, why don't we add a little bit of nitrogen back into the heliox, or helium and oxygen mixture they were using. And by adding that little bit of nitrogen into that mix, the tremors went away. And so that's how trimix was created.
It's amazing. And that's one of the things I read that study, and it is amazing to add a little bit of nitrogen back for the narcotic effect. So utilize the narcotic effect to our advantage to calm the diver and to reduce the high pressure syndrome.
Yeah,
that's absolutely amazing.
It was amazing. I mean, it was a very interesting project, and they did finally reach 2,250 feet, and they learned a lot. In fact, they actually even had some issues with decompression sickness during the ascent back to the surface. And I think they did have some DCS issues as deep as 1,000 feet, and no one had ever experienced that before, nor had they ever seen that before. And so they had to learn how to deal with those things as they went along, and all that became part of the body of knowledge in deep diving.
That's amazing. And to learn in oh my goodness, we're at 1,000 feet with DCS. Oh no, what do we do?
That's right. And you don't want to hear that when you're the diver on the inside of the chamber.
No, I can't imagine for a second. I mean, you read about some of the issues that go down, when they were exploring the Marianas Trench, and they talked about the cracking of the window and realizing that, wait a minute, we're 5 miles down and the window's cracking.
Yeah.
We can't just do an immediate ascent.
Yeah, there's a friend of ours who unfortunately passed away a number of years ago, not in diving. He actually had a medical issue, but he was one of the guys that worked with James Cameron when they filmed the Titanic, and they were going to use part of that for the Titanic movie. So this friend of ours, his name was Ralph White, and Ralph was the pilot of the submarines that were going down to the Titanic wreck to be able to do photography and videography. And he used to make sure that he told the people who were doing the videos inside the submarine that don't worry about the crackling sound you hear and the groans and the noise you hear during the descent, because it's simply part of it when you're getting under that much pressure. He said the thing to worry about is water. So if you feel water, then that's it. And so he always used to keep a squirt gun with him during the descent. You know, these guys are all worried, and he would give them a little squirt. And I'm not sure if I'd want that to happen while I'm down there. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Ralph was a great guy.
But I think that's a common thread that I've noticed among a lot of great divers, is that there's a sense of humor. I mean, I don't think some of this, well, you certainly need to take the science and the safety with absolute, we need to be safe. But you also have to have a certain sense of humor as
really
well.
Yeah.
And it's good to see that. And the best instructors that I've worked with and learned from or worked with over the years have been the ones that had a sense of humor, that they didn't take life too seriously.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good thing. And I would like to have been there for that. I think I would have been the guy with the squirt gun, to be honest with you. I heard a song this morning, and the lyric was, I could see myself doing that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.